Alright, stop me if you've heard this one before. Paramilitary organizations have weaponized nanotechnology to target specific genetic traits. Anybody can be a carrier of this disease, but only those with the unique, targeted quality are going to become victim to it. The disease was created by a plant-obsessed, physically deformed villain who is attempting to rid the world of specific genetic qualities. Who can stop it? A former espionage agent who's deflected from their country following a moment of deception on the part of their superiors and the loss of people they love. We follow our agent as they travel the world, learn of various twists and turns, encounter supernatural villains, fall victim to the nanomachines, and avert the spread of the disease, while recognizing that their legacy is equally as volatile as the genetic material itself. Of course, we're talking about James Bond. Wait a minute. With No Time to Die, Daniel Craig's tenure as James Bond comes to a thrilling conclusion, and director Cary Joji Fukunaga wants you to know that. Where most Bond films are self-contained narratives to varying degrees of complexity, Fukunaga pushes Bond into his age and reorients the plot as a question of legacy and personhood. It's basically a character study of James Bond, recognizing that he is a character that has lasted for a long time in cinematic history, but the actions that are expected of the character inevitably creates a legacy of loneliness, failure, and a difficulty to adjust to a normal lifestyle. We expect James Bond to be really boring. We expect him to just go and fight people and have random sex and fight bad guys because it's awesome. But what happens when you do that for an entire arc with one actor? Well, by the end, it'd be pretty likely that their relationships would be difficult, and they would have to question by the end of their career the legacy that they're going to leave behind. That's No Time to Die. In fact, the film is really explicit on its theme of legacy. Bond is at this point without a country. He's on the brink of being replaced by younger people, and he finds his nature to be the cause of most of his issues. Some of the more important moments of the film, where he loses an informant or he loses a friend, are directly as a result of his inability to follow orders. He knows in his heart that he's correct. The people he's going against are actually doing the wrong thing and trying to cover up an international conspiracy. But at the end of the day, his hot-headedness and his inability to come to terms with the necessary relationships in his life make things more difficult. Just like the genetic weapon that James Bond is trying to shut down during the duration of the film, his legacy is being passed directly through years and generations, and it's always ready to rear his ugly head. When we first encountered Daniel Craig's Bond in Casino Royale, he was a rather young secret agent who was engaging on a kind of serial escapade. It was a bit heavier in plot than older James Bond movies, but it was still just a general special agent story. At this point though, James Bond has lost lovers, he's lost his boss, and he's basically given up on attempting to find any semblance of a normal life. This is all to say that No Time to Die is rather consistent in its discussion. It's a rather happy medium that finds itself interested in being nostalgic and contemporary. If anything, it's a shame that Fukunaga is not going to get another chance to deal with the Bond character after this, as I think it would have been interesting to follow through on this little hybrid approach for even further. That said, the narrative that he's crafted is engaging. I was afraid to see this because I knew it was 2 hours and 40 minutes and I thought I would get really bored, but by the end of the movie, I was completely fine. It is absolutely a roller coaster through and throughout. There's no boring part, I promise. The choreography in this movie certainly isn't Mission Impossible, I won't even give it that. It's also maybe not nearly as flashy as something like Casino Royale, but for a film with very little downtime in between action scenes, the choreography in the fight scenes is incredible. It's engaging, it's captivating, and it's really impressive in the ways that they use terrain to their advantage. Fukunaga and company are really okay with making this film look super stylized, which is something that the more modern incarnations of Bond seem to be lacking. They were great action movies and pretty good thrillers, but they didn't have the pizzazz of the 1960s. This film, again, is a hybrid of both. It certainly is a modern action movie, and it kind of looks similar to most action movies nowadays, but a couple little leitmotifs make this thing super stylish. It's a shame then that the one thing that doesn't work in this movie for the most part is the script. Having seen True Detective Season 1, I fell in love with Fukunaga's writing, and it's a shame that in this case, the majority of the writing's okay, but you can tell in parts that he was directly trying to reflect the older movies. For example, if you've seen the film, you know that the final line is pretty egregious and bad. He likely did this because, well, that's what a 60s movie would do. It would be a little weird and a little campy. That's fine for the most part, but when you're trying to strike a balance between serious narrative and serial, you need to be really consistent about the way you keep the audience interested. Most of the time, I found myself engaged with the plot, but a couple of times there would be a line here and there that I just felt completely derailed the tone. I definitely support Fukunaga's direction in this case. It is really interesting to try to see some of the older dialogue styles pop up here, but I really wish he had watched out for a bit more of the embarrassing and childish moments. That said, No Time to Die is probably my favorite blockbuster this year. It's engaging, it's interesting, it's long, it's dynamic, and it's never boring. This is probably up there with Casino Royale as some of the best Bond movies ever made, and it certainly ends Daniel Craig's tenure with the character on a very high note. 8 out of 10, and 5 bags of popcorn.
Change the name of the show to On Cinema on Bond.